She had always been the kind of person people walked past without noticing. Even today, as she boarded the flight, she looked like someone who blended into the background. Her clothes were simple, her bag was worn, and her expression was calm, in a way that made people think she was just another ordinary passenger. No one knew that behind her quiet presence was a history no one on the flight could even imagine. She took her seat near the window, watching the ground crew move around outside. She did not draw attention. She did not speak to anyone. The passengers, sitting near her, gave only a polite nod and then carried on with their own conversations. She stayed silent, as if she was used to being ignored. Even the cabin crew treated her gently, but without any extra attention, thinking she was a shy traveler on a long journey. But inside, she carried a world of memories, some painful, some powerful. She had been trained in a life most people would never understand. She knew codes, signals, emergency protocols, and the sound of engines under stress. She knew the weight of responsibility that came with difficult missions. And she knew the cost of silence, the discipline of staying unnoticed when necessary. Yet today, she did not want to stand out. She simply wanted a peaceful flight and a quiet arrival. As the aircraft began to taxi toward the runway, she closed her eyes and breathed slowly. The hum of the engines was familiar and comforting to her. She could sense small changes in the sound, something normal passengers would never notice. But she said nothing. Not yet. She knew this crew was experienced enough to handle takeoff without any issues. Still, she could not shake the strange feeling in her chest. It was not fear. It was something deeper, like a memory trying to surface. This flight path crossed an air route she once knew very well. She had flown above these clouds many times before, in situations far more intense than this peaceful commercial flight. She almost smiled thinking about it, but then she returned to her calm expression. The plane lifted off smoothly. People relaxed, children began asking for snacks, and the flight attendants moved around with practiced routine. She stayed quiet, her eyes scanning the cabin once before returning to the window. She watched the sky open up, and a strange calm settled over her. She had always felt more at home in the air than on the ground. Then she heard it, a faint crackle of radio communication through the cockpit door when a flight attendant passed by. Most people would not have noticed it, but she did. Not because she was curious, but because she recognized the rhythm, the tone, the coded phrasing. It was not normal commercial communication. It was a military channel, a restricted frequency, one she used to hear every single day. Her heartbeat slowed. Not sped up, slowed. The way it used to during missions that demanded focus. She leaned slightly forward, listening carefully without appearing suspicious. The attendant moved away, but her trained ears had already caught enough to understand that something unusual was happening. A formation was being discussed, a possible escort. But why? She kept her expression neutral. Her hands remained still. On her lap, she did not want anyone to think she was anxious. Passengers trusted the crew, and she did not want to create discomfort. She had lived her life mastering control over her thoughts, her breathing, her reactions. This was no different. Minutes later, the captain made an announcement. His voice was steady, professional, but she could hear a thin edge of tension beneath it. He explained that due to airspace coordination, there might be a slight change. In altitude, passengers barely reacted. Most did not even look up from their screens. But she knew better. She knew this was not routine. Something was moving around them, and she knew exactly what it was. Her window view suddenly caught a faint angular shape in the distance, a dark silhouette cutting through the sky with precision. She blinked once. Slowly, she recognized the movement before the shape fully appeared. It was not a commercial aircraft. It was fast, silent, sharp. An F-22, and then another dot. She did not panic. She did not even look surprised. She simply watched, her eyes steady. As the jets took position on either side of the passenger plane, imposing, powerful, and clearly intentional, passengers began noticing. A few gasped. A child pointed. Someone whispered, "Why are there fighter jets next to us?" The cabin buzzed with confusion, but she remained still. She knew exactly why they were here. What she did not know, at least not yet, was that within moments, everything would change. The calm mask she wore would no longer hide her identity. The F-22 pilots were about to speak a name over the radio. Her name, and when they did, the entire formation would freeze, not because they were afraid, but because they knew who she really was. Asterisk. The tension in the cabin slowly grew as more passengers noticed the two fighter jets flying beside them. Some people leaned toward the windows, trying to capture photos or videos. Others whispered nervously, wondering what could possibly force military aircraft to escort a normal commercial flight. The crew kept calm expressions, but even they were unsure. Only she remained completely steady in her seat, breathing naturally, as if she had expected this moment. She could see the F-22 on the left side shift slightly, adjusting altitude with surgical precision. That movement was not random. It was a signal. She knew that signal. It was part of an old formation protocol she had once helped develop. Her fingers pressed lightly against her knees, not out of fear, but out of memory. She had lived through moments exactly like this, just never from a passenger seat. Passengers began asking questions. Is this dangerous? Why are they here? Is something wrong with the plane? But the flight attendant simply smiled and told everyone to remain calm. She admired them for that. They were doing their job well, even without knowing the truth. She glanced once more toward the fighter jet. The pilot inside was scanning the windows of the commercial plane. Not searching for a threat, searching for someone specific. She could feel it. Her name had already traveled through the restricted channel. They were not here for the aircraft. They were here for her. She leaned back slightly, trying not to attract attention. She had spent years staying invisible when necessary. She understood the importance of timing, of not revealing herself too early. But a feeling in her chest told her that hiding would not last much longer. Then the overhead speakers clicked softly. It was not the captain this time. It was the first officer, and his voice sounded tighter than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control. However, we have received a request from Air Command. There's a passenger on board they need to identify." People exchanged confused looks. Someone asked loudly, "Identify who?" Another person laughed nervously. Thinking it was a misunderstanding, she knew it was no mistake. The officer continued, "This is simply a routine verification. If the person hears their name, please press your call button so a crew member can speak with you quietly." The cabin fell silent. Completely silent. And then the name echoed through the speakers. Her name. It rolled through the air like a stone, dropping into still water. Passengers looked around, searching for the person who belonged to it. She felt dozens of eyes sweeping past her, but no one suspected her. Not yet. She looked too calm, too ordinary, too soft-spoken to match the weight that name carried. She froze for just 1 second, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of memories that came with hearing her name spoken in that tone, the tone of respect. The tone of someone addressing not a passenger, but a leader. She slowly reached toward her call button, but before she could press it, a sudden flash of motion outside the window caught her attention. The F-22 on the right side dipped its wing in a sharp, intentional salute. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't turbulence. It was the fighter jet equivalent of standing at attention. Passengers gasped. Did that plane just bow? What is happening? Who are they saluting? The truth was becoming impossible to hide. Her fingers still hovered over the call button. She took a long breath and then gently pressed it. A flight attendant approached quickly, eyes full of curiosity and a hint of confusion. "Ma'am, did you press your button for the identification request?" "Yes," she answered softly. "That name is mine." The attendant blinked as if she had heard something unbelievable. She glanced at her, then at the fighter jets outside, and then back again. May I just confirm your full name?" "Please?" She repeated it calmly. The attendant almost lost her composure for a second, before whispering, "Please stay seated. I need to inform the cockpit immediately." The attendant rushed away, walking faster than the professional calm would normally allow. The cabin was buzzing now. People whispered even louder. They tried to guess what was happening, who she could be, why the Navy or the Air Force would react this way. But no one had any idea that she was far more important than any of them imagined. After a few seconds that felt longer than they were, the cockpit door opened slightly and the captain himself stepped out. He did not walk down the aisle. Instead, he stood at the front, scanning the cabin until his eyes found her. Their eyes met. She saw recognition, real recognition. His posture straightened immediately. His voice lowered, controlled but unmistakably respectful. "Ma'am, Air Command has confirmed your identity. They are requesting a secure channel conversation with you. Would you be comfortable joining us in the cockpit for a moment?" Passengers stared. They had expected a threat, a criminal, someone dangerous. They did not expect respect. They did not expect the captain's voice to shift into formal protocol. They certainly did not expect fighter jets to salute because of her. She gently stood up, not proudly, not dramatically, just calmly, naturally, as if she had stepped into cockpits thousands of times before. But the moment she took a single step forward, something unbelievable happened. Both F-22s outside changed formation, instantly tightening, their escort around the plane in a protective stance. The entire cabin gasped again, and she knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk as she walked toward the cockpit, the entire cabin seemed to shift around her. People leaned back to give her space, though no one had been instructed to move. Something about her calm steps, the quiet confidence in her posture, made everyone react on instinct. She did not rush. She did not look around. She only focused on the doorway ahead. The captain stood beside the cockpit door, almost as if he were welcoming someone far above his rank. He moved aside and gently gestured her in. Inside, the cockpit felt tight and warm. The hum of equipment, the soft glow of control screens, and the steady rhythm of the engines filled the air. The first officer looked up from the radio panel, eyes wide with recognition, though he tried to hide it. "Ma'am, thank you for coming," the captain said. "Air Command wants to speak with you directly. I've opened the secure frequency." She nodded once. The headset rested on the arm of the captain's chair. She picked it up with steady hands, placing it on her head like she had done 1,000 times in her past life. The action was smooth, practiced, natural. The moment she adjusted the mic, a familiar voice came through. A voice she had not heard in years. "Command to flight. Confirm identity of the passenger." The captain stepped back slightly. She pressed the small button on the side of the headset. "This is her," she said simply. There was silence on the line. Deep, heavy silence. Then a breath. Then the voice spoke again, but it was no longer formal. It was respectful, almost emotional. "Ma'am, we did not know you were on this flight. If you were traveling under your old clearance, the entire route would have been secured." "I'm traveling as a civilian now," she answered softly. "I didn't want attention." Another pause. "With respect, ma'am. That choice is no longer in our hands. 2 squadrons have already been placed on standby. Protocol requires we escort you safely through this region." She closed her eyes for a moment. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because she understood what this meant. Her name, her history, her old position, none of it stayed buried forever. Even in retirement, she was still tied to a world that demanded precision and protection. What's the situation?" she asked finally. The first officer's eyebrows rose. He hadn't expected her to address Air Command with such authority. But she had slipped completely back into the role she once held. A voice replied, "There is classified activity in nearby airspace. Nothing threatening your flight directly, but enough that your presence requires precaution. The F-22's recognized. The name immediately. They're awaiting your instructions." Her instructions. The captain and first officer exchanged quick looks, realizing slowly who she must have been before she became just a quiet passenger. She tapped her finger lightly on the armrest, thinking, "Maintain current escort. Pattern," she said calmly. "No aggressive posture. Keep distance from the commercial aircraft and monitor radar activity. Do not signal unless required." Her tone carried no hesitation. She did not ask permission. She gave orders, and the reply came instantly. "Understood." Orders confirmed. The captain stared at her, eyes full of questions he dared not ask. The first officer looked like he had just witnessed something impossible. She removed the headset slowly and placed it back in its exact position. "Thank you," she said to the crew. "You're both doing an excellent job. There's no danger to the passengers. This is just precaution." The captain swallowed. "Ma'am, may I ask, should I address you by a title?" She looked at him with a gentle, almost tired smile. "Just call me a passenger today." But outside the window, the sky told a different story. The F-22s shifted. Formation again, not randomly, not aggressively, but in a formation only used for one purpose: honoring a commanding officer. The captain noticed it first. "Is that?" The first officer couldn't finish his sentence. He just stared. The two jets moved slightly ahead of the commercial plane, wings leveled in a perfectly synchronized salute, cutting through the air with absolute precision. The passengers in the cabin saw it too. Murmurs turned into loud whispers. "What is happening? Are they saluting someone? Who is she?" But inside the cockpit, the question lingered in a heavier way. The captain looked at her with deep curiosity. "Ma'am, with respect, why would F-22 pilots honor you this way?" Her expression softened, not proud, not secretive, just quietly reflective. "Because once," she said, "I commanded the unit that trained them." The cockpit fell silent. The first officer whispered under his breath, stunned, "You trained F-22 pilots?" She nodded. "Long ago, before I chose a life outside of command." The F-22's outside shifted again, matching her story with their actions guarding the commercial aircraft like it carried gold dot. She exhaled slowly. "Please keep this between us. I just want a peaceful journey." The captain nodded firmly. "Your privacy is safe." But neither of them noticed that down in the cabin, passengers were already filming the jets, confused and amazed. And soon, someone would approach her with questions she could not easily avoid. The sky outside was calm. But inside the plane, the real storm was just beginning. When she stepped out of the cockpit, the entire cabin felt different. The passengers were no longer distracted by movies or conversations. Almost every pair of eyes followed her as she walked back toward her seat. The confusion that had filled the plane earlier had now turned into something sharper: curiosity mixed with awe. She kept her gaze low, trying not to look at anyone directly. She never enjoyed attention, not even during the years when she stood in front of pilots who waited for her orders. Now she only wanted peace. She moved quietly, just as she had entered. But this time, people did not ignore her. They watched her as if she were someone important, someone they had overlooked without knowing. When she reached her seat, a teenage boy sitting across the aisle leaned closer and whispered, "Miss, are those jets here because of you?" She hesitated, then shook her head gently. "Nothing for you to worry about. Everything is safe." The boy nodded, though it was clear he didn't believe her fully. His mother pulled him back with a polite smile. "Let her rest," she whispered. But curiosity stayed in their eyes. She sat down and turned toward the window. The two F-22s still flew on either side of the aircraft, unwavering, protective. The sky around them was quiet and calm, but she knew these jets did not fly this close without orders from high command. They were waiting for a change. In the airspace, waiting for her next instruction, or simply waiting to ensure her safety until the route was clear. Her fingers traced the edge of her armrest. She remembered training young pilots, teaching them how to remain calm in high pressure situations, how to trust their instincts, how to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Some of those young pilots could be the ones flying beside this plane right now. The thought made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something like pride mixed with sadness. She closed her eyes to rest, but her moment of peace was interrupted when a soft voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, may I sit?" It was one of the flight attendants, the same one who had confirmed her name earlier. The woman looked nervous, almost apologetic, but she held herself professionally. "Of course," she replied quietly. The attendant sat on the edge of the empty seat beside her. "I'm sorry to trouble you. I just wanted to ask, is there anything we should be preparing for?" "The passengers are getting tense." She shook her head. "There is no danger. The jets are here only as a precaution." The attendant's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but the crew is trying to understand who you are. I've never seen the captain show this level of respect." She smiled softly. "I used to work in aviation, that's all." The attendant nodded, accepting the answer, even if she wanted to ask more. "If you need anything at all, please let us know." "Thank you," she said, and the attendant quietly left. But the peace did not last long. Moments later, a passenger from a few rows back approached. A man in business clothes, polite but visibly curious. He stopped beside her seat, hands clasped nervously. "I don't mean to bother you," he said, "but those jets, are they really here for you?" Her heart sank a little. She didn't want this. She didn't want attention, questions, or people staring at her as if she were a mystery. But she also couldn't be rude. "They are here on official duty," she said gently. "It's nothing to be concerned about." He nodded slowly, understanding that she wasn't going to explain more. "Thank you," he said, stepping back. But his question had been loud enough for several other passengers to hear. More heads turned. More whispers started. "Who is she? Why are fighter jets escorting this plane? Is she an official? Is she connected to the military?" She sighed quietly. She had lived a life of discipline and silence, a life where she often stood alone. She had never asked for recognition. She had never needed it. Yet now, in a simple commercial flight, she felt the weight of her old identity pressing against her. New quiet life. Then something unexpected happened. The F-22 on the right side suddenly tilted its wing, just a slight, smooth movement, a gesture she knew well, a sign of acknowledgement, a mark of respect. It wasn't for the plane. It wasn't for the crew. It was for her. And this time, a child sitting 2 rows ahead saw it clearly. He turned around wide-eyed and pointed. "Mom!" That plane just waved at her. The entire section went silent. Passengers stared at her again, not out of fear or suspicion, but something else entirely. Something like realization. Something like awe. She felt her breath catch. She had dealt with complicated missions, high-risk airspace, and young pilots depending on her decisions. But she had never felt as uncomfortable as she did under the honest, wide-eyed attention of civilians who didn't know what to make of her. She looked away from the window, hoping the moment would pass, but it didn't, single quotes D. Because only seconds later, the captain's voice came overhead again, steady but carrying an unmistakable tone of respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to acknowledge one of our passengers today. Someone who has served this country in ways most of us will never fully understand. Passengers leaned forward. Her heart stopped. On board with us, the captain continued, is a former leader who once trained some of the finest pilots in the air today. The entire cabin inhaled at once. He didn't say her name. He didn't reveal details. But it was enough. And she knew. There was no going back after this. The cabin erupted into soft murmurs after the captain's announcement. But no one dared to speak too loudly. It was the kind of moment where people sensed something bigger than themselves unfolding. The passengers looked between her and the fighter jets, trying to connect the pieces of a puzzle they never expected to see mid-flight. She sat completely still, her hands folded, her expression calm but thoughtful. She didn't seek praise. She didn't want it. Yet it had a way of finding her, even when she traveled quietly, without uniform, without rank, without the world knowing who she used to be. A few passengers offered small, grateful smiles as they passed her on the way to the restroom. Not out of curiosity now, but respect, appreciation. Even without knowing her exact story, they could feel the weight of her past. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the F-22s glide beside them like silent guardians. The movements of the jets were smooth, precise, and familiar, almost like a language she once used daily. Then, something unexpected happened again. The pilot of the left F-22 rolled his aircraft slightly, revealing just enough of the cockpit for her to see the helmet inside. A small mark on the helmet caught her attention, a symbol she recognized instantly. Not a rank, not a Squadron logo, a symbol she herself had designed years ago. Her breath caught quietly. She leaned closer to the window, not out of emotion, but recognition. Whoever was flying that jet had been trained under a program she once led personally. She remembered drawing that symbol for a group of young pilots who were nervous on their first day, telling them it meant courage under pressure. One of those pilots was flying beside her right now, and they knew she was on board. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss, may I?" It was the same teenage boy from earlier. His mother stood behind him, gently guiding him forward. She nodded, offering a small smile. "Of course." He sat on the edge of her row, eyes wide but respectful. "I'm not trying to be rude. I've never seen fighter jets fly so close to a passenger plane before. And they keep looking at you. Are they really your students?" The innocent honesty in his question made her heart soften. "Maybe some of them," she replied gently. "I trained many pilots. They were brave, disciplined, and very young back then." "Like my age?" he asked quietly. "Some were only a little older than you when they began," she said, smiling softly. "They grew into strong professionals." The boy looked out the window again. "They're protecting us because of you, right?" She paused, searching for the right words. "They're protecting all of you. But yes, they're also showing respect." The boy stared in awe for a long moment, then whispered, "That's really cool." She chuckled quietly. "They're good people, and they take their duty seriously." His mother stepped forward, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly, "for whatever you've done, whatever you've given." She nodded politely, but the gratitude made her chest feel heavy. Not in a painful way, but in a way she had not felt in a very long time. After they returned to their seats, a soft chime came from the speakers, signaling a message from the cockpit. This time, the captain's voice was gentler, more personal. "To our passenger, the escort will continue until we reach safer airspace. Air Command wants to ensure your journey is completely secure." She felt a mix of emotions rise in her chest. Gratitude, nostalgia, and something like sorrow. She had chosen a quieter life for a reason. She had stepped away from command to find peace, to live without the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of lives. And yet, Here she was again recognized, escorted, honored. She took a slow breath, feeling the hum of the engines steady beneath her. The aircraft continued its smooth path forward, the sky stretching endlessly around them. But then, a subtle change caught her attention. The F-22 on the right side shifted slightly, a precise, purposeful movement. The kind of maneuver used to signal incoming communication. Seconds later, she heard a faint crackle through the thin cockpit door. Someone was attempting to connect on the secure channel again. Her instincts sharpened immediately. Something had changed in the airspace. Passengers remained calm, unaware of the shift, but she could feel it. The jets were not simply escorting, now they were preparing. Within moments, the cockpit door opened, and the first officer walked down the aisle toward her. His expression held both professionalism and urgency, though he tried to mask the latter. He bent slightly and spoke quietly. "Ma'am, Air Command is requesting one more briefing with you. They said the situation outside is evolving." She nodded, standing slowly. "I understand." Passengers watched her rise, but this time no one whispered. No one pointed. They simply stepped aside, sensing the seriousness in the air. Before she turned to walk, she glanced out the window one more time. The F-22s were no longer flying in simple escort formation. They had shifted into a tighter, more defensive pattern. Something was happening, and she knew that whatever awaited her in the cockpit might require more than memories. It might require her experience. As she stepped back into the cockpit, the atmosphere inside felt tighter than before. The captain and first officer were both focused, their eyes moving quickly between the radar screen and the communication panel. The faint crackling of the secure channel buzzed in the background, filling the small space with quiet tension. The captain looked up as she entered. "Thank you for coming again. Air Command wants your assessment before they take the next step." She nodded calmly. She had been in dozens of similar situations years ago, though never from the passenger area of a commercial flight. She moved forward silently, as if her body still remembered the rhythm of command. The first officer adjusted the headset for her. She slipped it on gently, feeling the familiar weight settle around her ears. Once again, the world seemed to slow, as if her mind shifted into a different mode. Clearer, sharper, a voice crackled through. "Ma'am, this is Command. We're tracking unidentified activity in distant airspace. Nothing directly targeting your aircraft. But because of your presence, we are tightening our monitoring." She kept her tone steady. "Status of our escort? They've adjusted to a closer pattern for precaution. They'll remain defensive but will not escalate unless instructed." She scanned the radar screen, her eyes narrowing slightly. She recognized the formation markers, the altitude readings, the spacing between the aircraft. It was all familiar, so familiar that for a moment she forgot she was no longer part of that world. She leaned slightly closer. "Your team is making the right call. There's nothing threatening our route. But they should maintain distance and avoid unnecessary signals. We don't want to create confusion." "Understood, ma'am." The captain watched her quietly, absorbing every word. He had never seen someone who spoke with such calm authority, someone who looked ordinary but carried the confidence of a lifetime of leadership. Another voice joined the call, a younger voice, respectful but hesitant. "Ma'am, this is the pilot on your left. Permission to speak?" She froze for a second. She knew that voice. She pressed the button slowly. "Go ahead." There was a breath on the line. "I don't know if you remember me, but I trained under your command 5 years ago. You taught my class emergency response protocols and long-haul coordination." She blinked gently, a soft warmth blooming in her chest. "I remember every class one taught." The pilot continued, voice trembling with emotion he was trying to control. "Ma'am, when we heard your name on the frequency, we couldn't believe it. It's an honor to protect you today." She swallowed a quiet breath. You're doing your job well. That's honor enough." The captain's eyes softened. The first officer pretended to look at his instruments, but she could see the respect on his face. The pilot spoke again. "Ma'am, we just wanted to say thank you. Many of us wouldn't be here without your guidance." Her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest. "You earned your place through your own hard work. I only helped you see your potential." Silence filled the cockpit, not heavy, but meaningful. Then the command voice returned. "Ma'am, we are preparing to hand escort duty to a second team. Once you reach secure airspace, they'll maintain distance so the passengers stay calm." "That's a good decision," she replied. "Avoid unnecessary attention. We're also requesting your destination. Local authorities want to ensure privacy and support for you on arrival." She paused. She had not wanted attention. She had not wanted protection. She had wanted a simple, quiet journey. But now she understood her past had caught up, not in a threatening way, but in a way that showed how deeply her work had touched the people she trained. "My destination is personal," she said gently. "I request no special arrangements. I will travel as any civilian would." The command team hesitated. "If that is your preference, we will respect it." The captain looked at her, admiration clear in his expression. "We'll keep your privacy safe." She removed the headset, placing it carefully back in its exact spot. Her movements were slow, thoughtful. Years of discipline still guided her, even now. The first officer exhaled quietly. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying this, I've met many experienced pilots, but I've never seen anyone calm like you." She offered him a small, gentle smile. "Calm comes from knowing others are capable. You and the captain are flying well." The captain stood, shoulders straight, voice sincere. "If there's anything you need before we land, anything at all, please tell us." She shook her head softly. "Just a quiet flight." She turned to leave the cockpit, but before she stepped out, a soft beep from the radar made her pause. The screen showed the beginnings of a transition, 2 more aircraft approaching, joining the larger protective zone. The captain spoke gently. "The second escort team is arriving," she nodded. "Good." When she opened the cockpit door, she saw passengers watching her again, this time not with curiosity, but with a deep respect that made her heart tighten unexpectedly. She returned to her seat, and the F-22s outside shifted formation one last time. In a gesture she had taught years ago but never received personally, a farewell salute, she inhaled quietly, almost overwhelmed by the silent honor floating beside the aircraft. And she knew something even more unexpected was coming when they landed. The rest of the flight continued in a strange mix of quiet tension and deep respect. Passengers spoke softly, as if they were sharing the same secret. The sky outside remained calm, and the new escort team settled into position with a smoothness that only highly trained pilots could manage. The 2 original F-22s slowly drifted back, completing their final salute before turning away. She watched them go, her eyes following the sharp silhouettes until they disappeared into the blue. Their departure felt strange, like saying goodbye to students who had grown beyond the lessons she once taught. She felt proud, but also humbled. She had spent so many years guiding others, yet seeing them stand guard for her stirred emotions. She rarely allowed herself to feel. The cabin lights softened as the plane began its long descent. The captain made another announcement, this time without mentioning her. He simply reminded passengers to remain seated and thanked them for their cooperation. His tone was calm and controlled, but she could sense the respect under every word. As the aircraft lowered through the clouds, the escort jets remained visible, a protective halo around a plane full of people who now viewed her through entirely different eyes. The teenage boy from earlier kept glancing back at her seat, his expression thoughtful. His mother whispered something to him, likely reminding him to sit still, but his admiration remained clear. She rested her head back, closing her eyes as the runway lights appeared below. She wanted to return to her normal life, the quiet life she had built away from commands and responsibilities. Yet she also understood that moments like this, moments when her past unexpectedly touched her present, were inevitable. The wheels touched down softly. A smooth landing, professional, controlled, the kind she always respected in a crew. But the moment the plane slowed, she sensed something unusual. Normally, after landing, fighter jets would break away immediately. Yet these escorts held their positions longer, almost as if waiting for a final clearance. She glanced out the window again. 2 jets dipped their noses subtly, another gesture she knew well. A final acknowledgement. Once the aircraft reached the gate, passengers began to gather their belongings, but several glanced at her before standing. Some smiled, some nodded respectfully. Some simply watched, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. As she stood, the flight attendant approached her quietly. "Ma'am," the captain asked if he could walk with you to the door. "Only if you're comfortable." She hesitated. She never liked recognition, but she also understood gratitude when it was offered sincerely. "I don't want to draw attention," she said softly. The attendant gave a gentle smile. "People already noticed you, but they're grateful, not curious." That was different. Gratitude didn't frighten her. She nodded. The captain was waiting at the front of the aircraft, standing with a straight posture, not in formality but in respect. When she reached him, he spoke softly so only she could hear. "Thank you for guiding us today. I know you didn't have to." "You flew well," she replied. "You kept everyone calm. That's your duty, not mine." He smiled faintly. "Still, we're honored to have had you on board." They stepped out of the aircraft together. She expected to walk straight into the terminal quietly, blending in with the crowd. But the moment she crossed the jet bridge, she stopped. Not because of reporters, not because of officials, because 2 uniformed officers stood at the end of the bridge, not for an escort, not for a ceremony, not for attention, but simply standing at attention, for her. They didn't speak. They didn't salute physically. They only nodded deeply. A gesture of respect meant for someone whose service spoke louder than medals or titles. She met their eyes, offering a quiet nod in return. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic. Just acknowledgement between people who understood the weight of service. She walked past them, her steps gentle but steady, inside the terminal. Life carried on normally. Families reunited, travelers hurried, announcements echoed overhead. No one here knew who she was. No one stared. And for the first time since the jets appeared beside the plane, she felt like herself again. Just a traveler, just a quiet woman on a journey. As she moved toward the exit, she heard someone call softly behind her. The teenage boy from the flight ran up with his mother beside him. "Miss," he said, slightly out of breath, "I just wanted to say, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Her heart tightened softly. She kneeled a little to meet his eyes. "Brave doesn't mean being loud," she said gently. "It means doing what's right, even when no one sees." He nodded with a seriousness far beyond his age. His mother added softly, "Thank you for showing him what real strength looks like." She placed a hand over her heart. "Take care of him. He has a good spirit." And then she stepped away. No applause, no ceremony, no cameras. Just quiet footsteps disappearing into the terminal. Cameras. Woman who looked like a nobody, but whose name, when spoken in the sky, made even a few 2 pilots freeze.